Hello, good morning, dear students. Welcome back to our online classes. I'm Mrs. Snehal Mori, and today we are going to learn History's Chapter 2nd New Kings and Kingdoms, Part 1. This is very interesting topic, dear children. So let me first introduce this to you. What are we going to learn in this chapter? In this chapter, we are going to learn different dynasties. These red borders, do you see here, children? These are different dynasties. Okay. So, many dynasties emerged after 7th century. Now, why are we studying them? Was anything different in them? What are we going to study in this chapter? Let's see. Now, today I will discuss the key points of this chapter. First, the emergence of new dynasties. How administration was carried out in kingdoms. These all points we are going to learn in this entire chapter. Prashastis and land grants. Warfare for wealth. Tripatric struggle, Muhammad of Ghazni and Muhammad Ghori. Study of Cholas, kingdoms, temples, agriculture and irrigation. And the last one, the administration of empire. These points we are going to study in this chapter. But today we will learn first 3 points, that is the emergence of new dynasties, how administration was carried out in the kingdoms, and prashastis and land grants. So let's begin with our first point. Now, how did new dynasties emerge? As we all know, a king alone cannot run the entire empire, right? He has some ministers, some landlords, some warrior chief for a help to run or to administer his empire. Now they were acknowledged as the subordinates to kings known as Samantas. These people who helped king in ruling his empire, they were known as his subordinates and they were known as Samantas. Now what the Samantas did? Samantas gave gifts to the kings or overlord. To please the kings or the overlords, they gave the gifts to them. They also provided the support, military support to the king in wars. But the situation changed after the Samantas gained power and wealth. What happened when the Samantas had gained a lot of power and lot of wealth? The situation changed. Why? Because they declared themselves as to be Mahasamantas or Mahamandaleshwaram. Okay, they declared themselves to be Mahasamantas or Mahamandaleshwar. Sometimes they asserted their independence from their overlords. Sometimes they said that we don't want to work under any of the king. We ourselves will establish our own kingdom, and they asserted their independence. And one of the example of it is Rashtrakutas, whose chief was Danti Durga. Now let's learn more about the Rashtrakutan Empire. Rashtrakuta Empire. See here in this map, you can observe carefully, children. A red marking is given. This is what is the Rashtrakuta Empire. Now let's learn about it. How? Initially the Rashtrakutas were the Samantas. Okay, and the main king was the Chalukyan king of the Karnataka. But in the mid of the 8th century, dynasty overthrew his Chalukyan overlord and performed a ritual called Hiranyagarbha. In the mid of the 8th century, what Rashtrakutas decided that we will no more work under the king, Chalukyan king. We ourselves will establish our kingdom, and for that they performed a Hiranyagarbha ritual known as Hiranyagarbha, that is the golden womb. Now why was this ritual essential? This ritual was performed by non-Kshatriya people to become Kshatriya or a ruler. In those times, mostly the rulers were Kshatriya, and the non-Kshatriya people or the non-Kshatriya ruler used to perform the ritual known as Hiranyagarbha to transform themselves to a Kshatriya or ruler. Now here the question arises. Was it important to be a Kshatriya in order to become a ruler? What do you think, dear children? Was it important to be a Kshatriya to become a ruler? Is it essential to be of a particular caste to become a ruler, or is it essential to be an efficient person to become a ruler? Think and answer. Okay, next. Let us study, is it essential to be a Kshatriya or not, with a beautiful examples. Men from enterprising families, that means non-Kshatriya, Vaishya people, also became rulers and established their kingdom. So these people were not Kshatriya, but then too they established their kingdoms. Now who were they? Let's learn about them. Kadamba Dynasty. Here you can see here there is a Kadamba Dynasty, and these people were not Kshatriya. Then too they established their kingdom and they ruled over there. Example, Kadamban Mayureshwara kingdom. Their rulers were Brahmin by caste. They were not Kshatriya, they were Brahmin by caste, and they gave up their traditional profession. The traditional profession of a Brahmin was to compose Sanskrit poems, or to perform any ritual, or to preach something to the people. So this was all the traditional professions of the Brahmins, because they were only the learned class. They were the scholars who knew the Sanskrit and the regional language. But they gave up their traditional profession and took the arms in their hands and established the kingdom in Karnataka. Who? Kadamba dynasty was in Karnataka. Okay. Now next, there was also another example, that they are Gurjara Pratihara kingdom. It is Gurjara Pratihara kingdom. Given here in the map, you can see the Gurjara Pratihara kingdom. Gurjara Pratihara. Harichandra was also a Brahmin, and he gave up their traditional profession and took the arms, successfully establishing kingdom in Rajasthan. Here again comes a non-Kshatriya ruler, that is again a Brahmin ruler. He established his kingdom in Rajasthan. Gurjara Pratiharas in Rajasthan and Kadamba in Karnataka. Keep in mind, dear children. Now next point. Administration in the kingdoms. Only forming a huge kingdom is not important. A person should also know how to administer his kingdom. Okay, now let's see how they administered their kingdoms. Many kings adopted high sounding titles. Many kings adopted high sounding titles such as Maharaja Adhiraj, which means great king, overlord of kings, and also Tribhuvan Chakravarti, which means Lord of Three Worlds. So this kind of titles, high sounding titles such as Maharaja Adhiraj, Tribhuvan Chakravarti was adopted by the kings. But in spite of this, they had to share their power with Samantas, peasants, traders, and Brahmins. Now, why it was necessary to share their power? For an effective administration. Now, how? Let's study further. To run any administration, a king requires sufficient amount of resources. From where did he get these resources? Resources were obtained from the producers such as peasants, cattle keepers, artisans, etc. They were compelled to surrender a part of what they produced as tax, sometimes claimed as rents. Now, what was this resources which they obtained from peasants, cattle keepers, and artisans used for? They were used to finance the king's establishment, construction of temples and forts, and many a times they were also used to fight wars. Okay, next points. Now, these resources, who collected the revenue? Now, this is also a very important point. Function of revenue collection was generally done by the functionaries from influential families. Influential families means the families of the high caste. Many of times, the function of collection of revenue was done by the high class, means high society people. They were doing this duty of collecting revenue, and positions were often hereditary, means it passed from a father to a child, then his child. The position was passed from their father to son, son to again his son. That means it was hereditary. And same was true for the army also. Means, for suppose if I am a general in army, my son will also become the same, his son will also become the same. That means these positions for revenue collection and for army was hereditary. Now, a very beautiful example of 400 taxes. Chola Dynasty. See, here you can see the Chola Dynasty marked in the red. Okay, now the Chola Dynasty, they had imposed how many taxes? 400 taxes. Collection of taxes was very essential to run the empire. We have seen it before. The inscription of the Chola who ruled in Tamil Nadu provides an evidence to this. That means inscription means what? The writings which are found on the hard surfaces. We have studied earlier in the last chapter, right? So such kind of inscriptions of Chola dynasties were found as evidence in Tamil Nadu. Now they used more than 400 different kinds of taxes. In Chola dynasty, more than 400 different kinds of taxes was imposed on the kingdom. Okay, now for example, Vati, the tax in the form of farmed labor. Kadambi, land revenue. Taxes were imposed for thatching houses, using ladder to climb palm trees, access to the succession of to family property, etc. See now, various kind of taxes were imposed on these people in the Chola dynasty. For example, Vati, a farm labor, means a person has to work as a labor without any expectation from the king. Okay, now the Kadambi, land revenue, they have to give a land revenue. For thatching houses, if the houses are of 2 stories, then they have to pay the taxes. Then if they use a ladder to climb a tree, then they have to pay the taxes. Access to a succession of family, means if a person dies and he has to claim his property to his son, he has to give his property to his son. So this procedure was carried out in the kingdom, and for that procedure also the taxes were taken. So these are different examples in which the 400 types of taxes were imposed on the people during the Chola dynasty. Okay, now prashastis and the land grants. This is very important point. Prashastis we have learnt in the last chapter also. I hope you remember it. Some sort of this kind of prashastis means the copper plates. What are prashastis? Prashastis are the metal plates which contains details about the rulers. These prashastis were written by the Brahmins in Sanskrit and also in regional language. Very important. What are prashastis? Prashastis are the metal plates. What does it contain? It contains about the rulers in detail. And who wrote this? Brahmins wrote this because they were only the learned and scholar caste at that time. They knew the Sanskrit language and also the regional language. Now what did the Brahmins took in reward, because they were writing the prashastis for the king? Now what did the king give to them? See now, prashastis. A very beautiful example of the prashastis also given in your book. It is there. The achievements of Nagabhutta. Now dear children, whatever the king used to tell, the Brahmins used to write on the prashasti, but it was not essential every time what is written in the prashasti should be true. Many a times kings have to depict themselves as the violent, victorious warriors. They used to tell them to write lies also, and many of the prashastis are written wrongly also. Okay, one of the such example is achievements of Nagabhutta. You can see the kings of Andhra, Sindhva, Vidarbha, Maharashtra and Kalinga, the part of Orissa, fell before him when he was prince. Okay, he won a victory over Chakrayuddha, the ruler of Kanuj. He defeated the king of Vanga, part of Bengal, Anartha, the part of Gujarat, Malwa, part of Madhya Pradesh, Kirta, forest people, Turkish Turks, Vatsya, Matsya, both kingdoms of North India. So such kind of achievements of Nagabhatta are written on the prashasti, but it's not true. So it's not essential that everything written on the Prashasti must be true, because at that time the rulers used to in order to depict themselves to be a strong ruler, they used to write anything on the Prashasti. It has no evidence. Okay, now Prashasti and the land grants. As I told you before, now only Brahmins knew the language of Sanskrit, and they knew the regional language, so they used to write. Then what did the king give in return to them? King gave a lot of land for them. Okay, as the learned Brahmin composed Prashastis, king often rewarded Brahmins by grant of lands. These grants were recorded on copper plates, which were given to those who received the land. What was given along with the land? Not only the land was given, but along with the land, the resources of that land, right to collect tax, and also the permission of construction of wells, canals, and houses was given to the Brahmins. Okay. Now, Prashastis only, I'll tell you important fact. There is an important fact given in your book. Unusual from the 12th century was a long Sanskrit poem containing the history of king who ruled over the Kashmir. It was imposed by an author named Kalhana. He used a variety of sources, including inscriptions, documents, eyewitnesses, accounts, and earlier histories to write his accounts. Unlike the writers of Prashastis, he was often critical about rulers and their policies. An author named Kalhana wrote a long Sanskrit poem about the kings of Kashmir. Okay, now while writing this poem, he studied all the sources of history, such as the documents, inscriptions, eyewitnesses account, the histories of the account, everything he studied in detail and wrote a long Sanskrit poem. Whatever was true, he mentioned in that poem. It was not like that the king has told him to write so and so, so he has written as a Prashasti, how Brahmins used to write. But he gave an account of all the, he gave the examples, or he gave the proof of whatever he has written. Okay, so this is a very beautiful example of an author named Kalhana, because he wrote a long Sanskrit poem on the history of the kings who ruled over the Kashmir. Now today's homework, dear children. In what ways was the administration in medieval India different from the present day system? That means you are going to tell what are the similarities or what are the differences in the administration of the medieval India. For example, see now the taxes imposed. 400 different kind of taxes were imposed on the people in the medieval India. So at present situation, the government of India is doing the same thing, or it has been changed. If it has been changed, how it has been changed. Okay, so you are going to think over it and tell in what way was the administration in the medieval India different from the present day system. Okay, you have to think over it. All the factors you will think, and you will write the answer in your notebook. So this is what for today. We have completed our part 1, and in the next session we will resume with the part 2. Okay, I hope all my points are clear. If at all you have any doubt, you can ask me personally on my number. Thank you for watching, dear children. Thank you and have a nice day.